Hey folks, you can listen to Idioms on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Breaker, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and Google Podcasts. Search Idioms David Dyer on any one of those and subscribe. And welcome to Idioms episode 23. I'm your host, David Dyer, and Idioms is my mini-cast, 5 minutes at the most, about the same time it takes to clear out your browser history. You know why. And as the name implies, I talk about idioms, those phrases we say in everyday conversation that seem completely out of place, yet you know exactly what they mean by the way they're being used. Good, so let's go. This is Idioms episode 23, and the idiom we're going to cover today is 3 sheets to the wind. You've heard it. So I call McConaughey because I'm going to go bongo shopping, and I thought he'd like to tag along. And he says, "Sure, man, I'll go, but I got to warn you. I've been up since Tuesday, and I'm about 3 sheets to the wind. I spent 3 hours cleaning out the backseat of my car." Literal meaning, to defiantly hold 3 letter-sized pieces of paper directly in the path of a nor'easter. Contextual meaning, drunk, to be drunk, very drunk, or describe someone who's very drunk, drunk. So let's explore the origin. I know my first experience with the phrase was in about 1985 when some friends of my parents, the Pearsons, invited our family up to their campsite in Pentwater, Michigan for the day. Well, we arrived about 10 a.m., at which point my dad, God rest his soul, immediately started pounding Wiedemann's with Dr. Pearson like they were rushing a fraternity. Well, it didn't take long before my dad just kind of wandered off and nobody seemed too concerned. But a couple hours later, my mom asked Dr. Pearson to go look for him. Found him face down in somebody else's 2-person tent about 20 feet away. Dr. Pearson helped him up and they hobbled back to the campsite. And when my mom tersely asked my father how he was doing, he said, "I'm at least 3 sheets to the wind, Sue." Phrases.org.uk says the organization known as Canoe, Committee to Ascribe a Nautical Origin to Everything, for real, they exist, can put this one on their list because the beginnings of this one most definitely lie within the world of boating, sailing, water stuff. And they say the first evidence of the phrase in print comes from Pierce Egan's Real Life in London from 1821, where he writes, "Old wax and bristles is about 3 sheets in the wind." Now, I know it says in the wind instead of to the wind. Most think that the saying started with in and then was later changed to to. And Old Wax and Bristles sounds like a classic rock morning show that ain't going off the air until one of them dies. Coming up at the top of the hour, we got a little bit of Journey coming at you. There's an earlier example of a similar phrase from 1815 in the Journal of Reverend Francis Asbury when Asbury was traveling through Kentucky, and he writes, "The tavern keepers were kind and polite as Southern folks should be, and as Southern folks ought not to be. They were sometimes 2 sheets in the wind. Oh, that liquid fire." 2 sheets to the wind. Doesn't sound like nearly as much fun as 3. We'll get to that in a minute. Word-detective.com further explains the history. You see, when you hear the word sheets and you discover the saying comes from a nautical background, you probably assume that sheets are sails just like I did, and we would be wrong. Sheets are actually ropes or cables or even chains sometimes that hold sails in place. And if those sheets happen to become loose or unattached altogether, total mayhem ensues. Now, if you've ever seen or read about the depiction in books and movies of sailors, pirates, and other ocean-going types, you'll notice that alcohol is a big part of the lifestyle. So much so that the varying degrees of drunkenness are often described using nautical terms because that's the language these folks know. So, on the inebriation scale, if a sailor was 1 sheet to the wind, they were a little tipsy because 1 sheet being loose can cause the sails to flop around a bit and possibly lose power. If a sailor was 2 sheets to the wind, that equated to 2 sheets being loose and you were in major trouble. And if you were 3 sheets to the wind, well, 3 sheets being loose means the ship was flopping around uncontrollably, saying inappropriate things to the other ships. Nice aft. Insisting it was fine to sail home on its own even though it was obvious that it wasn't, and then dropping anchor just 20 feet away in someone else's slip. I love you, and I miss you, Pops. You're my favorite drunken ship of all time. So that's it. Episode 23 of Idioms is complete, and I'm fine. I can finish the podcast myself. I'm your host, David Dyer. Thanks for listening. Check back for new episodes every Tuesday and Friday, but until then, I'll catch you on the flip side.